If you don't diversify your investment portfolio, you could end up losing it all. But most business owners don't know how to diversify to mitigate those risks. That's why we created this resource for you. This passive investing guide is a must-have if you're planning to invest in businesses. Don't hesitate. If you have more than 25 grand liquid, then you can't afford not to take advantage of this resource. Download the 4 reasons why in 2021 you need small businesses in your portfolio now by going to www.abundantculture.co/guide.
Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast, where business owners like you come to learn how to grow the valuation of their companies so they can sell in the future. On this show, you'll learn how to sell for top dollar and invest in profitable businesses around the country. Now, here are your hosts, Jazz and Joe.
Hey, it's Joe here. Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast. We're so glad to have you back again this week. Today, we're interviewing somebody who has a very, very interesting and unique background. He's not only went to med school, but he also is a real estate attorney and a real estate investor and a gym franchise owner. And we're going to be talking to this person today about all their different entrepreneurial endeavors and how they continue to improve and reinvent themselves over time. So get ready to listen to and learn from our good friend, Seth Bradley.
Hi, Seth, and thank you again for coming onto the Abundant Culture Podcast. We are super excited to have you today because we're in the same mastermind. We always have great ideas jumping between all of us, and I know you and Joe have had some really great conversations in the past, so I'm excited to learn more about your story and how you run your businesses. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, we have to ask you, what's your backstory? Give us that journey.
Sure. Well, thanks guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. Excited to come on your podcast. We've known each other for some time now, so this is great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. I mean, honestly, the entrepreneurship game, it took me a while to figure out. And I think that my backstory might resonate with a lot of the folks that are listening to the podcast. So me growing up, I was never really exposed to entrepreneurship growing up. It was just, I grew up in the countryside of West Virginia, and I was adopted when I was only a couple of months old from South Korea by two of the most wonderful people on the planet. But I came from the bluest of collars. My dad's a retired coal miner. My mom's a retired grade school teacher. So, owning a business and entrepreneurship, owning real estate, that sort of thing was just not really part of my life growing up. So it didn't really seem attainable to me growing up in a small town in West Virginia. So instead, I thought to myself, what's the best and highest paying job that I can get? And to me, that was becoming a doctor. So I went down that pathway. Went to medical school for a year and even a little bit into my second year before I literally just got up in the middle of class and walked out during my second year in medical school. Ended up going to get my MBA and then my law degree. So I've done the entire gamut of graduate school. So if anybody needs help with that or some advice about where they should go, what they should do, and the cost benefit analysis, just hit me up, let me know. So I worked in big law for 6 years after that. And along the way, I just, I always had that feeling, right? That feeling you don't belong in the corporate world. And I think a lot of folks that are listening to your podcast have that same feeling when they're in the office. So now I'm a solo real estate attorney with my own firm. And, during that whole journey of working in the big law firm, I discovered, real estate investing, and we can dive into that a little bit later if you want to. But I also just wanted to start businesses. Outside of real estate at first, I was kind of looking for something recession resistant. So I started looking at laundromats and liquor stores. Those were the first thing that came to my mind as recession resistant. And during that search, my wife was actually working out at a franchise boutique fitness studio called Burn Boot Camp. And she was like, maybe you should look into that. I mean, because at that time we're transitioning from Charlotte, North Carolina, back out to the West Coast into Southern California. And there weren't really any burn boot camps out here, even though it was blowing up in the Southeast United States. So I looked into that, and we can maybe dive into that story a little bit longer, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background there.
Awesome. So one of the things I'm wondering personally is you decided to go into real estate law, correct?
Yeah.
So what influenced that? How did you go from basically a doctor seems to be the way to go to basically saying, I like law, but not only law, but specifically real estate law. How did that kind of come to pass?
Yeah, I think I still had kind of that blue collar mentality behind it because I was, I dropped out of med school. I knew I didn't want to do that anymore. But then I was like, well, what's the next best job I can get other than being a doctor? It's okay. Well, I can be a lawyer. So I went to law school. And then when I was at law school, I realized I did not want to be a litigator. That wasn't really my thing, but I did like business. I was attracted to business and transactions. So my first job out of law school, it was just kind of as a general corporate transactional attorney. But I got a little bit of real estate work there too and started getting interested in real estate and gravitated towards that and tailored my practice around it.
Awesome. And what was the transition between working in real estate law and then wanting to be a real estate investor? Because one of the things that I know about you is that you're also a real estate investor, which I think is really cool to, have a real estate law degree, but
Right.
also invest passively or even actively too. How did you make that jump from, still kind of blue collar, just want a good high paying job to now I want to build wealth through real estate and then eventually businesses as well?
Yeah, I think it was just meeting with clients that were real estate developers, investors. And, these were huge deals. I was working at a big law firm. So, I mean, they're like $100 million plus financings and deals. And, they weren't Donald Trump or something that were closing these deals. They were just regular people. Right. And I was like, man, okay, well, I'm sophisticated enough to do this. I'm helping these guys close this deal. I can do the same thing. But it didn't, escalate as quickly as I had suspected. I started out kind of small and I house hacked into a duplex and bought some rentals and did some flips and did that kind of thing. And now I'm scaling into big commercial buildings, those deals that I was talking about when I was practicing law.
Yeah, that is really, really awesome. So when it came to just thinking about how you're going to build out your portfolio, because it seems like you're one of those people that's really building a portfolio. Did you know from the onset that you wanted to have businesses be a part of that? Or was it just kind of like an opportunity that you fell into? What's the mentality? Because I know tons of people who invest in real estate, but don't have, another business outside of that. And there's people who, have businesses, but don't have any real estate. And I think you're kind of bridging that gap between those two things. What made you want to do that? And how did that start happening?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to diversification. I mean, I love real estate. That's kind of my bread and butter with my practice and with investing. But I wanted to diversify and I wanted to get some other things that, if real estate turns sour for a little bit, then I have other streams of income to build from. And that's when I started looking at recession resistant type of businesses and looking at laundromats and liquor stores. Those are just the first things that came to my mind. And I ended up with a gym, which is probably not that recession resistant, but
depends on the type of recession.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I started kind of just learning that. And, and you guys know exactly how it is. I mean, the ins and outs of businesses are really the same when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
So to piggyback off of what you literally just said, like 5 seconds ago, you're involved in like multiple businesses. So have you seen like a common problem between like the attorney business, the real estate, and the gym? So yeah, is there like a common problem, like any challenges that you've had to overcome over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any business, it's about scaling and building systems, right? So you're not working on the business just constantly and doing all the work that you can outsource and delegate to other people. So it comes down to focusing some energy towards that and not just kind of putting your head down and doing everything yourself. You've got to kind of keep the big picture in mind and say, well, what's my highest value for my time and what can I delegate to other people to do or hire somebody else to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. When did you realize, because I think you had it sounds like a fairly quick progression between high paying job and then kind of self-employed to real estate investor to business owner. I think that's just it probably wasn't smooth, but it sounds smooth probably to the people who are listening. That progression. My question is, when it comes to you mentioned systems and delegating tasks, where in that journey did you realize that you had to start doing that? Like, when did you realize, oh, I need to, maybe get a VA, I need to start maybe hiring employees, I need to start delegating these tasks so I can, grow and scale, as opposed to, working 16 to 20-hour days running these
Right.
various different types of projects?
Yeah, I think that it took actually the gym to push me over the edge there, because at that point in time, like me doing real estate and doing flips and hiring contractors and managing them and managing the property managers and that kind of stuff. I was still kind of handling all that myself. I didn't really have any other team members.
Mhm.
So it took the gym for me to start realizing, this is a business where I need other people that are going to be involved and do a lot of the stuff that I don't want to do or can't do or don't have time to do. So that, I think that's the time. So it did take me a while, because I started investing in real estate in 2013, didn't get the gym until about 3 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome. So when it comes to the gym, in that progression, like, one thing that holds a lot of people back from entrepreneurship or scaling their business is they feel like they don't have the funds available to invest in real estate or to invest in their business. Were you kind of just bootstrapping this whole thing, basically taking the money from your job and then putting it into your various different types of projects? Or were you also raising capital? And if so, like, how did that whole thing really come about?
Yeah, different ways. I mean, to start out, I was using my active income to invest in real estate on the side from my practice. With respect to the gym, that was a lot of money up front. Ended up being about $250,000 to open the gym. So we actually explored getting SBA loans to try to do that. And as you probably know, that's really difficult to get with a startup. And with the qualifications that you needed, it was like basically you had to have as much cash liquid in your bank to get the same amount for the loan. So that defeated the entire purpose. If I had that much cash, I probably would have just done it myself. But I did have a really good W-2 job at that time. So I just applied to like a SoFi personal loan for a significant amount. It was like $100,000. And I got approved within like 24 hours. It was insane. I was like, oh, well, wow. I don't know why I've been on the phone with the SBA for this long, trying to get, this crazy loan and jump through all these hoops. And I just applied to SoFi. I got the same interest rate and got $100,000 in my bank account the next day. I'm like, okay, we're good to go.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've actually never asked somebody, but I think this is a perfect chance to ask you, when it comes to like transitioning into investing in business and things of that nature, do you think that it's important that people focus on those high paying careers first so that they can fund their different endeavors that they want to work on? Because I think in our society, there's this, idea is like, do what you love doing.
Yeah.
And I think there's some merit to that, but also on the other hand, if you're not getting paid what you need to be getting paid and what you love doing, maybe there's a roundabout way to where you can still do what you love, but it's like that short-term sacrifice of getting that high-paying job, working it, and then using that to actually fund what you actually love doing. What is your opinion on that? Is it, get the money and then do what you want? Or is it like just try to do what you want from the beginning and just kind of take the struggle throughout?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people answer that different ways, but I encourage people, and on my podcast, I talk to a lot of my audiences, attorneys or doctors that have high-paying W-2s. I encourage them to stay with their active income. I mean, they've worked a long time to get where they are with school and working at big firms or have clients and all this stuff. Even if you don't love it right now, it pays really well, and you should just use that active income to start buying back your time piece by piece. Maybe doing your passion, doing real estate, doing your side business on the side for now, until you feel comfortable enough for you and your family to be like, okay, well, I might not be making as much as I was making at the W-2, but I'm comfortable enough now where our expenses are paid and we can get by. And at that point in time, maybe step away, and then you can dive in head first and put all your time and energy into that side project.
If you own a small business and you might be looking to sell, you could run into some major issues. Forbes estimates that 9 out of 10 businesses listed never actually sell. Why? Because there's only one way to sell. You need to do these 4 steps first. So if you want to be a part of the 10% of businesses that sell for profits, we've created a free checklist for you so you can sell without those hurdles that normally hold you back. Download the free checklist by visiting www.abundantculture.co/checklist.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I really like that answer. Just because like nowadays you really hear a lot of people just saying, do what you love, do what you want. And then it's like, well, you're broke. How are you going to do all this? I mean, Joe and I, we didn't have like a career when we started in business. So we had to do it that way. But we had high paying jobs. Oh, believe me, like I'd still be there and we'd be doing this podcast on the weekend.
And I think sometimes like there's this, I think entrepreneurship is becoming more popular. And I think the sad thing is sometimes that people kind of downplay those jobs and careers that they do have. And the way I kind of think of it, and at the very beginning, I was the same way, partly because I couldn't get a job anyway. It was really hard for me to get a job. So it's like, obviously I was kind of salty and resentful about it. But over time, I started to really, really think on that and just say, like, look at other people's situations. And I think, a job, especially if it's a high paying one, is something to be grateful for and really cherish while you have it, but not necessarily be tied to it. And I think your journey specifically shows how you were faithful to each thing that you were doing, but you never forgot your end goal, which was financial freedom or whatever it is that you invest for. And you kind of brought that with you on your journey and then put your money towards it when you had it. So I think a lot of people can take that lesson from you, because I think there's a lot of kind of like when you said you applied for that loan, most people would not have gotten approved, let alone got $100,000. So I think there's something to be said about that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's valuable. I mean, that W-2 is a valuable resource. So use it while you have it. I mean, not only just to get, a personal loan like that, but even that's how I started in real estate, was house hacking and getting, only having to put 3.5%, 5% down and getting a really low interest rate on these residential home loans, because I had a really good job. So they were willing to lend me really good terms and get these loans time after time. And I got a lot of properties that way. Nowadays, I can't get those loans. I mean, they look at me and they're like, you're not bankable. Like,
so one of the things I'm curious about is you look like a fairly young guy, and you've had, started going to med school, became a lawyer, worked on real estate transactions, real estate investor, and, gym owner. Does all of that knowledge kind of help build upon, to your next, whatever your next endeavor is? So like, did some of your skills that you gained from attempting to go to med school, did that help you in your law degree? And did your law degree help you in your real estate and so on and so forth?
Yeah. I mean, I think all experiences really lead you to the person that you are today. I mean, even for med school, it was really hard. And all those lawyers and doctors that want to argue out there, which was harder. I mean, it's medical school for sure. So I went there for over a year, and then I went to law school, and they were saying, the people in there were saying, oh my gosh, it's so hard. There's so much studying, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you guys have no idea. Medical school is way harder than this, but not too many people can be able to compare and contrast that stuff. But overall, I think just putting myself in all those different situations and different businesses and different schools has given me confidence to, take on anything. So like if something comes up and somebody asks me a question or wants some advice on business, I think I can give a pretty poignant response, just because I've been through a lot, and I can answer stuff pretty confidently at this point because I've got the experience behind it.
Seems like it.
Absolutely.
So I'm really curious about the gym and like even more specifically, how you navigated during the pandemic. I know that, it's not technically over right now, but it was a pretty hard, at least couple of months for everyone. So what are some changes that you had to make within the business, and any like pivot points that you had to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I have to give all the kudos to my wife. She's the operations manager. I don't run the day-to-day operations of the gym. I just kind of help out with all the legal mumbo jumbo and contracts and, contractors and all that kind of stuff. But, we did it together as a team. We really had to pivot as we went. I mean, I used to never watch the news, right? I was one of those people that said, don't watch the news because it just wastes your time and just rouses you up. And I had to start watching the news because, they were closing gyms and had to move inside, outside, quarantine, all this kind of stuff. That's a different story. But anyways, pandemic, we actually opened. So I said we had the gym for 3 years. We signed the franchise agreement 3 years ago, but we've actually only been open for 1 year. We opened, our grand opening was 2 weeks before the pandemic hit last year.
Wow.
So we had our grand opening, wide open for 2 weeks. Pandemic hit, we had to close our doors and we had to quarantine, the 14-day quarantine. So we did like online Zoom workouts and and we're a new business. So we don't have that many members. We don't have an income. We don't have anything. And my wife actually quit her W-2 to run the gym. So it put us in a pretty precarious situation. But we just continued on. We did the online workouts when we were allowed to. We opened back up inside. Then we moved outside and inside and outside and inside and whatever, the California governor tells us to do. So we've just had to really stay flexible and pivot when we needed to stay legal. And it's been a journey, but we're actually seeing light at the end of the tunnel now.
That's excellent. Great. And I'm glad that, it's starting to get better for you guys. And I totally forgot that you were in California. So when you said California, I was like, that's a whole other beast on top of it's like there's the coronavirus and then there's California.
Right.
Like there's a whole other level.
Right.
Which is crazy. So
yeah, I mean, we're not even allowed to be open inside right now. And Texas just opened up wide open. I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, that's nice.
I don't even think Texas needs masks anymore, do they?
No. I think they just stopped the mask. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. It's like they went back to like 2019. Like that's insane.
Right.
So
but I will say that we are doing great. I mean, we grew the membership from 0 to over 250 members now, which is way into the black at this point during the pandemic. So that's pretty insane. While we saw other gyms going out of business. I mean, one of our main competitors that was like a half a mile down the road out of business.
Wow. And to that point, how did you guys market to get people in the door? Because I think, one of the things that I'm not a natural marketer by any means. I don't think it's something that I was like naturally born with, but it's something that I try to study because I just see the importance of it so much. And I think I have gotten a lot better than I used to be, because if you asked me to write copy or anything years ago, it wouldn't have been good. It was a money loss guarantee. I was guaranteed to lose you money if you had me do anything marketable.
There it is. There's the guarantee.
Like, how did you guys get people into your doors and really grow that membership from nothing to over 200?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that we learned to delegate and hire somebody else that's better at it. At first we were doing kind of the Facebook ads, doing that ourselves, like trying to decide how much money to plug in, trying to decide our audience, trying to, build those ads and figure out what the best way to do it was, let alone learn, the Facebook software to do it. And we eventually figured out that that's kind of a waste of money because you're not optimizing your dollars. So we ended up we outsourced that and hired somebody to do that for us. So they'll actually they'll do the ads, take those leads and bring them into our gyms. The only thing we have to do is accept the person at the gym. So that's kind of the big secret for us, at least as far as like, the Facebook advertising and online advertising goes.
That is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, a question I have, because we talked about like delegating multiple times throughout the podcast. How do you go about hiring the managers and assistants and employees? Do you look for specific traits? Or do you want them to have experience? Tell us a little bit more about your hiring process.
Yeah, I mean, so there's obviously job specific traits depending on what you're hiring for. But, to me, a lot of, an interview is only going to get you so far. You're only going to learn so much. So you really want to just kind of talk to them and really get a feel for their personality. I think people that are genuinely curious go a long way. People that are kind of continuing to want to learn, they're not just doing it because they have to, but they're, just genuinely curious. I think that's a really good trait to have. Obviously intelligence. I mean, you can speak to somebody and have a decent conversation with them and tell if they'll be able to pick stuff up, depending on what the job is. And just being proactive, I think, is another really important trait. Is just, somebody that will, if they don't know something, instead of just asking you right off the bat, they'll Google search it. That's really a really quick thing for me. It's like, why don't you look it up yourself? Like, that's what I do. If you ask me a question, I'm going to get on Google and I'm going to look it up and then I'm going to tell you the answer, but I'd rather you just look it up and figure it out yourself. And then if you can't, or if you think that I have like the answer right off the bat, sure. But
yeah. I think it's, it's a certain level of autonomy that you want people on your team to have. It's like, you don't want to have to give your input on any and every single situation that happens on a day-to-day, because at that point you might as well just do everything yourself,
Exactly.
which kind of takes away from your time. So I always like when somebody's able to take charge and say, hey, here's the problem and here's the solution. I implemented. Is it okay? I love when my manager does that. So it's awesome. And 9 times out of 10, it's like they do it perfectly fine anyway. So
yeah, good enough. 80% is good enough if you can just handle it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Spoken like a true business owner.
Right.
Yeah.
And with your marketing team, just so our other listeners kind of get a better idea of how to delegate that, when it came to figuring out who you were going to hire for marketing, one of the things I always wonder about that, two things actually, is was that person did they specifically only do marketing for gyms, or were they just for small businesses kind of in general? And then two, do they only work on specific platforms?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's really important because there are so many people out there that market and put together Facebook ads and have coaching programs and all this different stuff that they can sell to you nowadays. So you've got to kind of dig in and make sure that they know what they're doing. And for us, we hired a guy that his name is Dave Pancham. He actually does gyms. He only does gyms. And he actually specifically has other Burn Bootcamp clients as well. So he had client testimonials from other Burn Bootcamp owners specifically. So we knew going in that he already knew the business. He knew our audience. He knew, copy wise, like what we needed to put in there to attract our clients. So it was a no brainer with that. And I think that can spread to any business. I think you need to get as specific as possible because, when you first start looking, you start thinking, well, I can't find anybody. And then you find one, you think he's the only guy out there, but really there are lots of folks out there. You just need to take your time and find one that's, specific to your business.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really good piece of advice because Joe and I, we've been looking for marketers for fund and stuff like that. Yeah. And everybody does marketing. So it's you could either get somebody that does general marketing and they'll give you okay results, or you can niche down, get a super specific person, and then they'll give you extraordinary results. And as we can see, that's worked for you.
For sure.
Yeah. Specific as you can get, the better. And just take your time. Because like I said, when you first start, you're thinking, oh, I can't find anybody to do it. And then you find one and they're probably pretty good at sales because they're good at marketing. And they're like, yeah, we should hire that guy. Probably not. You need to keep looking. And then if he happens to be the best one, then circle back.
Yeah, absolutely. So you signed on to do this franchise 3 years ago. Opened a location. I also hear that you're buying another location or have bought another location. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we're not all the way there yet. We're still in negotiations for an owner that already has one that's open. So that's the one we're trying to get. If we don't get it, it's not the end of the world. We've been in negotiations for a while. We don't want to overpay, but we are planning on opening more. The whole idea behind opening one gym was opening 5 gyms. We wanted to get 5. And if it weren't for COVID, we were hoping to already have that. So we're hoping 2021 is going to be the year. You usually buy 3 at a time. So we're looking to open 3 more up this year and perhaps take over another one.
That's
awesome. So awesome. So for the other 3 gyms this year and possibly the acquisition, are you raising capital for that? Or what's the plan for funding since it's pretty heavy upfront costs?
Yeah, the plan is to refinance the loans that we have already in this one and get those loans in the name of the LLC, because the way we structured it was to get the personal loans in our individual names and then we loan that money to the entity that owns the gym. So we're trying to get those loans into the name of the LLC for the gym. And then that'll continue to build that credit, maybe get some other loans under the LLC, or perhaps take out more personal loans, taking up the ones that we refinanced out of. And we're actually a lot more intelligent going into it as far as what we need and how to negotiate with the landlord a lot of those costs. So we know exactly what it's going to cost to start this up. So we'll negotiate a lot harder as far as getting the tenant improvements and things like that from the landlord.
That's really good. Yeah. It's like that first business. I think that first business outside of real estate is always it's just if I think it's the same beast, but it feels very, very different.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure if you were just buying another, real estate project or an apartment or whatever the case may be, you would have knocked it out of the park. And then you go into business, it's similar, but it's different. It's really hard to explain. But I do think that first one teaches you so much. Like, the acquisitions that me and Jasmine are going after now, we can approach them with so much more confidence than we could before, because you screw up on so much on that first one. And it's crazy. It's kind of like the first child where you're like, you're trying to figure out what's going on. It's like, you can't leave them in the room by themselves for like 2 seconds. And then the second one is like,
it'll be fine. Yeah. Less is more.
Right.
So we covered so much on this podcast episode already. I feel like this was like one of those rapid fire. I saw on Clubhouse that somebody was on like a rapid fire Q&A, and I feel like that was like the tempo we were going. So if you just had to choose like one takeaway for the listener to walk away with, what would it be?
I think especially the way things are right now, or have been, I suppose, and I don't want to sound too corny, but I think perseverance is really important and something really to focus on. Who was saying this the other day? It was Ed Milet. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of him. And I don't know if this is his quote or he just quoted somebody else, but he said, the quality of life is directly proportional to the amount of uncertainty that you can handle in your life. And I love that. It was like, the more things that you can handle without like losing your mind and just kind of going with the flow and being flexible and not letting things get you down, I think the more successful you'll be in the end. I
totally agree. Like perseverance is, if you don't have it, become an entrepreneur and you'll get it.
Eventually.
Like you'll get it eventually. It's like no choice. So when it comes to either your business, personal life, or even spiritual life, how do you like to spread abundance to the people around you?
I do my best to just give out free knowledge. I mean, especially now that I've launched the podcast, I have tons of people just reaching out to me for advice about real estate or entrepreneurship or passive income in general. And a lot of people actually reach out for legal advice too. So I've got to be careful with that. So, I think just, giving advice and, I don't have like a coaching program or anything like that. So I just, I talk to people. I mean, even if, I had someone call me today, they wanted some advice on starting an Airbnb business. And that's not my specialty, but I have a good bit of knowledge about it, and I can send them some links and send them some people that I know. So I did that, and just things like that. And, in the past, I've talked to a lot of people that are thinking about going into law school or even medical school or any of those places. And I've got that experience behind my belt. So I kind of just give them some food for thought to just think about, what's that going to look like on the back end? Like, do you guys really want to do this? Not discourage them, but at least, give them some things to think about.
Yeah, good expectations. And I think that's really valuable too, because I think when you can give somebody healthy expectations about whatever it is that they're actually going into, at least you can say somebody told you, as opposed to, a lot of things I've done in my life. I had no clue what I was getting into. And I still enjoyed the journey by the end of it. But it's like, man, I wish somebody would have pulled me to the side and said, okay, you're going to have to do this, this, and this.
Right.
Because we're doing stuff right now that's new to us. And it's like unexpected things happen all the time. So I'm glad that you can be that kind of like mentor for other people. I think that's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
If somebody wants to either work with you or your team on, maybe they want to reach out because they want to know more about your gym, or they want to know more about what you're doing on the real estate side, or maybe they have a real estate legal issue and they need your help on that, how would they actually get into contact with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the social media platforms. The handle is always at Seth Paul Bradley. And then check out passiveincomeattorney.com. That's got a lot of free information and the podcast episodes and all that kind of good stuff on there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Seth, for coming onto the podcast and giving us and our listeners a wealth of knowledge, because this was really fun and we learned a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Abundant Culture Podcast with Jazz and Joe. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, then leave an honest rating and review. And remember, we're ready to buy your business. So if you're ready to sell or passively invest in other small businesses, Go to abundantculture.co for more information. We publish episodes every Friday, so we'll see you next week.